If we as men spend our entire time like, I'm a tough guy, I'm this, I'm that, if all you do is project that image, man, you are brittle, right? Like
That's right.
there is nothing you can withstand if you're constantly tense.
Today on Raising Men, I'm joined by Paul Kix. He's a journalist, a storyteller. He's the author of You Have to Be Prepared to Die Before You Can Begin to Live. Paul's work has taken him deep into the heart of what drives people, especially in extreme moments. And some of those same themes show up in fatherhood and in raising men. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. It is just an absolute pleasure to have you.
It's likewise, my friend.
Thank you. Now, your career has revolved around uncovering deep human stories. How has being a storyteller shaped the way that you see fatherhood and the narrative that you pass on to your sons?
Oh man, that's such a great question. I think probably, oh wow, I don't even want to be flippant with it. Let me think that through. So, all right, probably the best way to answer that is to say that I think a lot now about raising the boys, not just with, I guess what you would say, the traditional traits of masculinity, strength, boldness, assertiveness, but also I guess you could say for a whole more holistic approach, like make sure that they do so with kindness as well. Make
Yeah.
sure that they realize that actually what it means to be a real man is to lead a household, yes, but then also be kind enough to everybody who lives in that household. And frankly, like I try to practice what I preach, but it's not, I sometimes I fall short. Like there are times where I'm yelling at the boys or our daughter, or, like I can be short with my wife. And I think it's something that I'll probably myself, how to be a father is something I'll probably have to continue to practice
Yeah.
until they're until they're their own fathers, right? Until my
Yeah,
daughter is mother.
absolutely. Yeah, I recognize that in myself. I did the same thing, and part of that journey is, I mean, obviously, ideally, we would never make any mistakes, and we would never snap at our kids or at our wives or something like that. But it's just as important in those moments are an opportunity to model the right repair behavior too.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it's kind of important to have some grace about, well, okay, fine, we all fall short, but this is what we do when that happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like my wife came to me last week and was basically like, my mother-in-law, she has dementia, and she's lived with us for about 10 years. She's had the condition has been pronounced for about the last two. And she came to me and she was just like, I need you to be more of a rock than you have been. And what she meant in that moment was, I need you to sort of like see me, extend the sort of kindness that, you used to do all the time to me.
Yeah.
Cause I was concerned slash consumed with my own career. Our kids are all teenagers now, and there's a lot of activities that are constantly going on. My days seem sort of busier than ever, and
Yeah.
I'd sort of forgotten about her in that mix. And so it's just been like a conscious effort the last week or so to be like, okay, here I am. What do you need? Let's take a moment, like check in with you. And by the way, like doing that, she said to me, I don't know that there have been times where I don't want to bring my own problems to you because I see like, concerns you have about work or concerns with the kids or whatever. And it's like, why should I add one more thing? And that honestly, man, like that was even worse because it's like, oh my God, like if you feel that you can't come to me, then this isn't like this. I'm not doing my job. Right.
Where
So
there is something fundamentally broken. I mean, that is the wing is off the plane at that moment.
yeah. So then it's a question of, okay, well, it's actually, I feel better. I feel in some sense rejuvenated if I know that you can come to me. Right. So
Right.
whatever concern you think I have, which is she's a we've been together more than 20 years. She can read me quite well.
Yeah.
Um, just know that like if you come to me, I can pivot from that. Uh, and like I so okay, so like what does it mean to be a modern man? my dad, my grandfather, they were farmers. They grew up in Iowa. They rent the I'm the sixth gen well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm the fifth generation farmer, son of a farmer. And I did not farm, but everybody before me did. And
Yeah.
so the men that I'm familiar with are guys who, fix everything before them, don't say a whole lot, are reserved and strong.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that that would be the way to lead my life, and to a certain extent it is, right? Like, for a long time, I was in corporate media, and I would always when I was used to bitch about where I worked, my dad would be like, "I literally don't know how to help you here because, like, I've been around 16," right? So he's like, "I don't know what it means to have all this upper management." I was at ESPN for a long time, so it's like,
Yeah.
you know, just the layers and layers between ESPN and Disney of management and navigating that. Anyway, the upshot is I've been on my own now for the past 5 years, and in a certain respect, like, what I saw as a kid was very helpful for me to, like, figure out how to do things on my own now. At the same time, my dad never saw a therapist. I see a therapist. I see it as almost like a physical check-in, right? Like, why
Yeah.
not talk to somebody about what's going on in my life? I think that's very healthy. So something that would have been verboten certainly in my grandfather's. I don't even think it was around, right? Like 70 years ago
Right. They
in
didn't even
rural,
exist.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And certainly, like, my dad would have never done that, but I talk with my dad about, like, what my therapist has told me, and it's been incredibly helpful, you
Yeah.
know? So it's just I guess that's what I mean, it's just a willingness to say, okay, where can I acknowledge vulnerability? Where can I acknowledge my own weakness? How, by acknowledging that vulnerability or weakness, can you sort of accept it, which is it itself turns it into its own form of strength, right? Because you come to understand yourself better.
Yeah.
So that's how I try to live my life these days, and that's what I try to tell the boys too.
Yeah.
In addition to, like, trying to get them to come to my Saturday morning boxing class, which I go to, which is awesome, right? But, like, it's just the yin and yang of life, and from that change from boyhood to manhood.
Yeah, it's one of the metaphors that I like to use is, who's the stronger boxer, the guy who has an impenetrable block, or
Yeah.
the guy who doesn't have any block at all? He doesn't even need it because you can just literally wail on the guy and it doesn't affect him.
Yeah.
And,
There's
and that's the
speaking of,
difference
like,
between putting all those walls up and being vulnerable.
yeah, and so one of I've seen a therapist off and on now for about 6 or 7 years. One of the things that he said that really resonated, this is years ago, is he goes, "You want the tactile strength of bridges." And his own father was some sort of engineer. I wanna say a civil engineer, which is where he would
Um,
have learned about this. Do you know much about bridges, Sean, like how they're
no,
actually
no,
constructed? Okay,
educate me.
so yeah, okay, I didn't know this either until my therapist. And I don't know, actually, I never fact checked this. I just took his word at it. So, like,
Right.
if any
We'll find
engineer in
out.
the
I think
audience.
I'm sure people will chime in.
Yeah, I'll be like, "Actually, that's not quite." So imagine the Brooklyn Bridge, right? And I said, "Okay, I've been across it many times." He's like, "Okay, what do you think that bridge is made of? And is it made of just, absolute, like, tiled in metal where you cannot turn a screw another inch? Or when you look at a bridge, and if you take a side view of it, as if from a drone were approaching it, he goes, if you
Yeah.
look at it closely, what you actually see is the bridge moving a little bit,
Yeah,
which
sure.
looks almost scary, right? But he's
Yeah.
like, that's actually intentional because it's called, it needs to have a little bit of flexibility. Without that flexibility,
Yeah.
uh, what would happen is the construction of it would ultimately just corrode. It would collapse beneath itself because it's constantly so tense. So it's
Uh-huh.
that what he called the tensile strength of bridges is to actually make sure there's a little bit of fallibility built in.
Yeah.
So in other words, like, to extend the metaphor, a little bit of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so true. Like, if we as men spend our entire time like, I'm a tough guy, I'm this, I'm that. If all you do is project that image, man, you are brittle, right? Like,
That's right. Yeah.
there is nothing you can withstand if you're constantly tense.
Mhm.
But if you allow yourself to accept basically life and all the entire emotional range that comes with life, I think I'll probably you're in a better spot. And I don't want, man, I hope that doesn't sound preachy because it's not as if I always knew this. In fact, again, like fatherhood, I would argue I'm still learning this day after day,
Yeah, same
but it's
here.
something I've come to learn, somewhat now.
Yeah, I think that absolutely rings true for me as well. And it's like part of the definition of masculinity is being a protector.
Yeah.
And the almost trivial version of being a protector is being a tough guy,
Yeah.
right? Being willing to get in people's faces, being strong, I can beat anybody up, all of that stuff. And yeah, I mean, sometimes that's what's necessary in order to be a protector. It's certainly what was necessary 30,000 years ago to be a protector.
Sure.
But in our modern world, being a protector is about much more than that. And in
Yeah.
fact, oftentimes it's about not being that at all. Because if you're demonstrating this really tough facade to your boy, and that's what you're modeling to them, and that's what they think they need to do in order to make their way in the world, in a lot of ways, the world is not going to be conducive to that, especially now.
And you're
And
gonna
so
I
you're
also
not protecting your kid.
yeah, I also think what you're doing, if you constantly project that image, that you run into conflict with people who are doing the exact same thing, right? You
Yeah.
kind of attract it. You attract that defensiveness.
Yes.
Uh, and it just, I don't know. I, I don't want to sound like old man shouting at clouds, but when I see, like, when I go to the gym and I can see the younger guys who are,
Right.
teenagers or 20, and I was probably this way too, like when I was a teenager in my 20s. And I can see the guys where it's like, it's all, I'm the alpha through here, right?
Yeah.
And you can almost see, man, there's something that is probably broken inside of you for you to project it like that. Because there isn't necessarily like a quiet, easy confidence. It's
It's just
something
pure
that's much
performance.
more, it's performative. It's
Mm.
posturing. Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
don't even really understand how silly they look to everyone else. I used to have this trainer back when I lived in Dallas, and the trainer, he owned this kind of fancy gym in North Dallas, and he was training me one time, and there were a couple of guys in the gym who were doing that, kind of making the performative noises and stuff. And he told me this story about he used to train this old guy, this 74-year-old guy, but the guy was ripped.
Yeah.
And these when he first opened the gym, there were these muscle heads that were there, and they were doing that, making a ton of noise, and they were doing chest presses with dumbbells, and
Mhm.
110-pound dumbbells, and just like, I'm pushing it up there and then dropping the weights. And you're not supposed to drop the weights. So my trainer, he takes this 74-year-old man over to the bench where they are. And he's a very soft-spoken guy, very built. And he says, "Do you mind if we work in here?" And of course the guys are like, "Yeah, yeah, no problem." And here they have this 74-year-old man who's now sitting down the bench. He picks up these 110-pound dumbbells and proceeds to do a set of 10 chest presses using these exact same dumbbells, and then sets them down very gently on the ground. And then my trainer just nods at him and walks away.
I love
That
that. So good.
is masculinity to me.
That is. That's so good. Like,
Yeah.
I love the NFL. I have actually a love-hate relationship with the NFL because I love to watch the NFL, and I
Yeah.
also see, like, the CTE, and I'm like, "Oh god, how many guys are gonna" when I watch Red Zone, I'm like, "How many of these guys are gonna end up in 10 years, like, unable to move?" But what I tell my own boys is, like, I remember from my youth, do you remember this? What Barry Sanders would do every time he'd score a touchdown?
I don't. No.
He'd just hand the ball to the ref. Why? 'Cause it was expected. Like, of course, Barry Sanders is basically like, "Of course I'm gonna score a touchdown. Why should
Yeah.
I celebrate that?"
Yeah. Oh, that is so powerful. I
That's
absolutely
just
love
like,
that.
I love it. It was like the ultimate flex. "Here you go. I'm gonna
Yeah.
go back to sidelines now."
Yeah, we talked a little bit about your journalism career and ESPN stuff like that. One of the things I just absolutely admire about you is um it seems to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me you looked around and realized that journalism was collapsing.
Yeah.
And I can just imagine what you were going through and you're just like, I got to figure something out here.
Yeah.
And you reinvented yourself, and you reinvented yourself essentially just by putting your craft out there and inviting the world to comment on it and experience it and experience the world through your eyes. And that gave rise, in my view, to some really, really amazing storytelling. What
Oh, thank you.
yeah, what did that season in your life, how did you think about that, and what did that teach you about courage and failure and resilience and modeling that for your kids?
Well, so I got laid off from ESPN when I was 40. I'm
Mm,
44 now, about to turn 45. And so what I could tell you is I've learned far more about myself the last 5 years than I did in the first 40.
yeah.
Far more about myself. And, like, one of the first things you learn, or I learned, w okay, so let me sort of set up the minds that, like, what my wife and I were thinking. We it wasn't hard to see that the magazine journalism I loved, that I grew up adoring, that I thought I would do for quite a while, like, come 2010, 2012, certainly by, like, 2015, I was like, I'm not so sure how much longer this is gonna be around. So I start to pivot at that point, just thinking about, like, what else could I do?
Mhm.
And I thought, well, if I stay in corporate media, I'm just gonna basically be, like, jumping from, you know, thawing iceberg to thawing iceberg, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how much longer I'm gonna keep myself from above water if I do that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
maybe if I try to go out on my own, I'll be on a little bit, like, better terra firma. And so what I began to think about, like, was what would that look like? So I began to put in place what I really started to do is put myself through my own MBA. Like, okay, well, what does it mean to, like, go out on your own? And what I learned, and I would say this to anybody, this isn't just relative to the creative types, though I would say this is particularly true to creative types. You can take your existing skill set and figure out the ways in which it's applicable to the marketplace. So I had, for instance, what did that mean for me? Well, um, it meant starting a newsletter. First
Yeah.
off, just so people would start to know who I am. And at first it was gonna be in promotion of my first book, which was called The Saboteur, and I quickly realized that, like, if I just promote the book week after week, nobody wants to read that
Nobody
at
yeah,
all.
nobody wants to tune in for the commercials.
Yeah, nobody wants that. So then, like, around, like, week 3, I pivot to, well, maybe I could sort of, like, tell them what I had learned, because I had not only by that point been, like, a writer and editor, but I had learned from, I'd had the good fortune to be published in the New Yorker and Esquire, and
Yeah.
my agent was the former editor-in-chief of Esquire magazine, David Granger, who in the magazine world is like an absolute giant. Like, he's on
Yeah.
the Mount Rushmore of giants in that field. And so what I basically started to do in the newsletter was like, okay, well, just like, I was approaching for it as like, here's what I've learned, right? And it's just like little hints and tips. And if you're doing this, consider that. Like, here's how you do interviews. Here's how you can consider writing an opening. Like, here's how you consider doing a structure. And it started to, I don't want to say take off, because I don't have like hundreds of thousands of subscribers, but there is like a dedicated audience. Like, there's
Yeah.
people, when I looked even today at, most of the time you'll get an open. I'm on Substack now, but, like, and it doesn't really matter what platform you're on. You'll get like an open rate of something like 20 to 40%. Mine has consistently been above like 50% for years. And it's,
Wow.
again, it's not a massive audience, but it's just like the people who come to it like really do want to know this stuff, and
Yeah.
they check in week after week. So that was helpful. And then from there, I was like, okay, well, that's cool. And then, like, I started to get emails from people like, wait, can you go deeper on this subject or that subject? And so that led me to think, well, what if I actually created like a digital course? And so by the time I get laid off, I'm like, okay, well, what if I started this digital course, and this course is called The Storytelling You, and where I actually have to revamp it a little bit now, because it's like the idea of just like doing stuff for long form journalism, like that is itself, like, I got to gear it more toward now like entrepreneurism, and maybe like book writing, but be that as it may, like it launched it, and I had cohorts, and you were one of them. You took it at one point, and that's great. Thank you. And but it was just basically like, here's how to do the things that I've learned, right? And
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, how else can I be helpful to people? And it's like, well, I have published 2 books like a couple of years ago, and people were like, how do you write a book proposal? And so I started to help people with that. And then because I had experience, like I was both writing my own books and then helping to shape other books, like the memoirs of like famous people and whatnot. And a couple of them have done really well, on the Times bestseller list. And so now it's like, okay, well, I can help other people do that. I guess
Yeah.
my point here is that I never thought to myself, well, actually, I never thought to myself, okay, I'm going to just like completely reinvent myself. I thought, how can I take my existing skill set and basically figure out, like, are there things that people would want? Like, are there things that people desire? Or do I know something that's just maybe a little bit more advanced than what somebody else knows? And if so, would they pay for the privilege of learning more about that, or me helping them directly with that? Right. And I still like my primary focus is still writing books. I've had a little bit of good fortune with Hollywood, so now I also oscillate between writing books and like production and screenplays and whatnot. But when I'm not doing that, like the majority of my time these days is spent either trying to consult people in a group setting, like what the Storytelling U is, or consult people one-on-one with like
Yeah.
books. And I'm not going to say it's easy, but oh my God, like that transition, Sean, like there were some times, especially right around 2020, 2021, when it was really scary because I'd never done this before.
Right.
It took so much to figure out how can I get past my own fear? Frankly, like honestly, I still deal with that. I have this tendency to what if and just throw out endless contingencies, right?
Yeah.
Endless possibilities.
I did
And
the
the
exact
what
same
ifs
thing.
can go 2 ways. The what ifs can go, wow, what if this really goes right? And sometimes I'm on this high, I'm like, wow, this could lead to this, could lead to this. And other times, like if I get in a bad run, or like a couple of deals don't go the way I'm hoping they will, a couple of arrangements with clients or whatever, or they back out or whatever,
Sure.
um, then I can start to catastrophize. And even today, 5 years later, I'm like, okay, is that real or is that just the fear speaking? So this is, I'm sorry, a little bit of a soliloquy, but like when you asked, what is it like? And I said, well, I've learned far more about myself than anything else these
Yeah.
last 5 years. I've really learned what it means like to stare down fear and even leave aside that, like look deep within myself and say, what is it where is that emotion coming from? What is, what is motivating that emotion? Is it real? Can I counter that emotion? If so, how? Journaling, prayer, meditation, sometimes a session with my therapist, right? Like whatever the case may be. And that's like, I think I've heard this from other entrepreneurs and frankly, people who are more successful than me, like, make more money than I do. Though money shouldn't be the only marker. And
Yeah.
they say
Yeah.
that
But
in
it's
the
a good
end,
way to keep score. It's at least a number.
yeah.
Yeah.
But what they talk about is something that I think is really true. In the end, like it isn't so much about creating the business as it is creating the sort of true self, right?
Yeah.
Like creating the thing that's like able to stare past that thing that really scares you,
Yeah.
and what's on the other side of that, and what's it like to live out in that no man's land, and how do you begin to navigate out there? I've for all of its tribulations, and there have been quite a few the past 5 years, there have been there's been success too, and I've just really come to enjoy it. I get why my dad has been a farmer for like 50 plus years professionally, right?
Right. Yeah. It's almost like you turned a career in journalism into a career in authenticity.
Oh, thank you, man. That's kind. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
think, I mean, I think if part of the reason you get such a great open rate on your newsletter is, and I'm a I read your newsletter, and that's what it drips with authenticity. You're just sharing your journey, and it's you're the character, and it is you have a craft, a storytelling craft, very good, and you're telling your own story in that newsletter, and it's really powerful, and it's fun to watch, and you get good information out of it too. You can apply it to your own life. Wow, I could see how I could do that too. And
Yeah.
it's really fun. It's really great. It's a really great read.
Well, thank you. If
Um,
I could just say, like, there's something applicable here to anybody else who's listening and thinking about how do I wanna try to do something. I think I'm a big fan of chronicling, kinda your point, Sean, like, you chronicle your own life, and if you
yeah,
have the courage to put that on the page, not just the triumphs, because honestly, like, I've the times that I've gotten far more responses from readers has been,
right,
like, the times where, like, I'm like, I'm in a sort of an uncertain spot right now, and I'll put that in the newsletter, right? And I'll be like, "This
wow,
is what's holding me up this week," right? And then the emails that those weeks are they they're just, like, far more voluminous than,
that's
you know,
amazing.
like
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
and I'll bet
Yeah,
you
like
really supportive.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
I think it's because, like, people want to come back to the idea of authenticity. It's so easy to say, yeah, I had the good fortune of one of the story that I wrote this year, a couple years ago, was made into a movie this year, and I talked about that in the newsletter, and people were like, "Oh, that's great." But then, like, when I also said, like, 2 weeks later, "You know what? It hasn't like, I'm the same guy. I thought it was gonna make me better, and now I'm like, oh, shit." Like, I'm the same guy with the same problems, which I also wrote about, like, again, somewhere between 2 weeks to 1 month later.
yeah.
Like, that email got way more responses,
Then
than
I'm making this awesome movie. Yeah, there's a lesson there.
yeah. To close that thought out, I think that it's because we are drawn far more to each other's flaws than we are our best features. I think, like, when somebody actually says, "This is who I am, warts and all," it just sounds true, because the easiest thing to say is, "I did this thing and it's awesome," right?
Yeah,
It's much harder to say, and it's yeah, I don't even want it to sound self-congratulatory, but the thing I've learned in like, when I've been interviewing others, what I'm always trying to get to is what my good friend, Wright Thompson, whom I used to work with at ESPN, he calls the gripe, and the gripe is the moment when like, he's interviewed a lot of, like, he's done, like, stories on Michael Jordan, right? But
right.
the gripe is, "Okay, yeah, you're great, but, like, what's the thing that's actually bothering you right now?"
Yeah,
And the gripe can be something external, it can be something internal, but once you get to the gripe, then it starts to become real because now you're relating to somebody else on, like, an individual level where the pain, like, everybody feels pain, everybody feels vulnerability in some way, and so that's the thing that you wanna try to relay as a storyteller. And again, like, whenever possible, part of the reason I don't shy away from that is because I know, like, I know the gripe works, right? So
yeah.
if I'm gonna relay my own gripe in the editions of the newsletter, then, I know that, like, people probably relate to it.
Yeah, and we have this social media culture that is the opposite of that. Like, it's all about showing your world in a way that is perfect.
Yeah,
And I guess that's popular too for a different reason, but the authenticity is way more powerful.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you and your wife are raising interracial sons in a world that I think tries to weaponize identity somewhat.
Yeah.
Um, how do you manage that? And I mean, how do you think about that as a father? And how do you keep your sons from becoming a victim of that?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, they have a lot of questions these days. They're 14, the boys in particular, and our daughter's 16, the boys are 14. So we've always told them, Sonia's led the charge here, that you are biracial, yes, but America is going to very likely see you as black because they're going to see
Mm.
you as something that is other than white.
It's yeah, not
Um,
white is the yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, it's almost the antebellum era one drop rule, right? Like, one drop of black means you're black. Those so there's some that thinking, certainly not those actions, but that thinking still exists. Like, "Oh, that guy's, not So I mean, the kids can identify themselves however we want to. That's what I try to tell them. But
Right.
like we've also stressed to them, America's going to see you as not white, and I think in like 10 to maybe 15 years, America will be a a not white majority. I'd have to look at the census data to verify that, but
It's coming.
but
Yeah.
they're going to very yeah, they're going to very quickly feel maybe even less other than they do right now. What I would say that's kind of remarkable is so the identity thing has had its ebbs and flows. Like, we're married in Dallas in 2007, a former Jim Crow state. Nobody cares. Like, when we
Yeah.
were dating, this is, the deep South, this is Texas. Nobody cares who we
Yeah.
are. Now, when we move from Dallas to Boston, especially as we're going through like some parts of rural Tennessee. And I remember one day in particular where we were going to stop to go get a burger. We left within like 30 seconds of walking in because it was just obvious the stairs we were getting that we were not welcome there.
Wow.
So like there's been these, but also like when we move up to Boston, we're like, oh, we go and we look at a place in South Boston to rent, and the real estate agent who's helping us, she's like, I actually wouldn't, if I were you two, I wouldn't rent here, which is shocking because there was nobody in Dallas who said, you can't live in any neighborhood. But in liberal most Boston, it was still sort of these enclaves where it was,
Yeah.
tribal in nature.
Yeah.
Uh, so we dealt with that, but like really like oh gosh, it's 2025 now. So like 2017, after Trump's elected the first time, there was definitely this divide between are you on the side of I should say I'm just going to state my identity, but my political identity, like I'm a moderate liberal to sort of classic liberal, and there was this push among the left like how are you going to identify yourself? And we at first were like, well, we're just going to sort of hold the same values that we've always had. But we saw how identity began to come more and more to the fore. And people that were to the left of us suddenly began to make identity like a core sort of feature to the point where it became its own segregation. And that's where we didn't really like it, like,
Yeah.
you would see, I don't remember exact, I think it was Oberlin, maybe it was NYU, who had segregated dining areas
Right.
in their cafeterias. This is in
Right.
like
I remember
2017,
reading about
2018.
that. Yeah.
Yep. Um, After George Floyd is killed, and there's a whole George Floyd story that ties in with my own and Sonya's. But after George Floyd is killed, this white woman approaches me like of the progressive left, and she's like, I just don't know how you can raise black sons right now. Not meaning like she's literally saying, I don't know how you as a white man can raise your own sons, which I had to walk. It was a dinner party, and I had to literally like walk out of the room
I
because I
can't
was about
imagine
to
having to deal
explode
with
at
that.
her.
Yeah.
Right. So that was a thing. But then also it has honestly, like I felt that sort of the peak woke era, I feel like we're past it. And I feel that there's I don't feel myself, and I don't think Sonya does either, such an emphasis on race and identity as we saw, 5 years ago. But, I wrote You Have to Be Prepared to Die Before You Can Begin to Live for the kids in large measure because I wanted them to see that, like, there are people who look like you who dealt with situations that are far worse than your own.
Yeah.
And that segregation that they faced, like you're facing a form of it today, either from, alt-right form, like the bullshit of like Nick Fuentes and all those people on the edgelords on the right. It's just like, that's ridiculous and toxic. And I really hope that the conservatives really get rid of that because I
Yeah.
hope there's no home for that in American discourse. But if
Yeah.
there is, then like, my God, what does that say about America? But in any case, like if that actually is going to run its course in the same way that wokeness has run its course on the left,
Mhm.
I'm hopeful that in the future we can come to something that resembles kind of like the way that Sonya and I were, again, in the Deep South in like 2004, 2005 through like 2015, which is just like nobody really cared, like it was just kind of like you are who you are.
Yeah. It
At
was
least
almost like, and I was in Dallas around that same time, and it felt like Dallas was aware of its identity as a former slave state, as part of the Jim Crow South and all of that, and celebrated opportunities to demonstrate that isn't the case anymore.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that was be nice to get back to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like the Dallas that I knew 20 years ago was the home of an evangelical pastor like TD Jakes. I think right after we moved from Dallas, it had its first, well, I know it had its first Hispanic woman become the sheriff while we were still there.
Wow.
And then I think it had its first black police chief, I think right after anyway, my point is that, like, to your point, Sean, it it was fully aware of its past and seemed to try to move past that. And, it's honestly like there are still some liberal enclaves where, at least that we see now that we live in the Northeast, where it's kind of still a little bit stifling and annoying. But even then, like on the whole, it's not the same. 2025 is not the same place as it was in 2020.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. Okay, so I want to share a quick story about something that happened last week with my son. And I want to get
Okay.
your feeling about it because I did not know how to deal with it. And so I'll share the story and then I want to know what you think and then I'll tell you what I actually did.
Okay.
Um our school, my son's school it's a great school. It's really close. I can walk him to school. It's great. And they do this fundraiser thing and there's a private company that comes in and it does this fundraiser. And I actually don't know what percentage of the funds they take, but I doubt it's small.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to sponsor them on a per lap basis, and if you sponsor them at $3 a lap, then they get this prize, and if it's $2 a lap, it's this prize, and they're supposed to raise money this way, and it turned into this freaking competition between the kids about who can basically convince their parents to sponsor them enough and or shame their parents into sponsoring them enough. And the whole thing was so disgusting to me that my wife and I decided that we just weren't going to participate. And
Yeah.
we've given money to the school. We've donated money to the school directly to the school. You want me to donate money to the school? I'll do that. But I'm not going to participate in this little charade.
Mhm.
And so this is a principled stand that we decided to take. And my son came home last Thursday and he was very upset. And he was saying to me, he was trying to convince me that it's not too late. They run the race that day and it's not too late. You can still sponsor and all of this stuff. It's only $3. And I said to him, I said, listen, it's not $3. It's $3 a lap, Lake. How many laps did you run? I ran 46 laps. Okay, what's 3 times 46? And he told me, and I said, that's how much money you're asking me to sponsor you for. And that's fine, but the school doesn't even get all that money. And I'm
Yeah.
opposed to it. And he got really, really upset. And he says, I'm so sorry. And he ran out of the room screaming. And then I went out, or crying. And I went over to him and I said, I sat him down and he said to me, I go, what? Why is this so important to you, buddy?
Yeah.
And he goes, well, the other kids in the class, they all got prizes and
Oh.
they're kind of bullying me and they're making fun of me for not having a prize. And I got absolutely livid. And I don't get that mad very often, but I was really mad at this point.
Mhm.
And of course, I'm not mad at him. I'm mad at the school, and I'm sort of mad at myself also because this my principled stance caused my kid to have to endure this bullshit.
Yeah.
And so that's the preamble. What would you do? How would you think about that? What would you do? Or what would you advise me to do in that circumstance?
Oh, well, what immediately springs to my mind is a somewhat similar situation. I was on our town's little league board,
Hmm.
in large measure because there were some dads, and maybe you've run into them, Sean, who took little league very seriously,
Oh yeah.
right? And it's pretty easy to see why, right? Because
Yeah.
they see their own success and failure in their son's eyes.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I'm on that board and trying to act as almost like a counter agent. And one day, the head of the board is like, okay, we're going to do our raffle ticket and we want to raise this much money. Now, the board, the Little League, like the league itself is actually separate from the town, which I grew up in where like the town was kind of like the town and the school was kind of like one and the same with respect to sort of the extracurricular sports that they'd have. So
Yeah.
that was its first disconnect. But I'm like, okay, whatever. Like our town's bigger than the one in which I grew up. So that's fine.
Yeah.
But then I got a chance in the subsequent board meeting to say, okay, well, they're like, we want to raise $15,000 because we have to, we have to keep the upkeep to the fields. We've got all this off-season stuff. And I'm like, at first, like, okay, that makes sense. So we're going to do this raffle. And it's the same sort of thing as what you're describing. The kids having to go around. It's just basically like, you got to spend $20 here and each kid is trying to raise something like 300, $400. I'm like, okay, that's, it's whatever, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of a lot, but whatever. Because you're already, if your kid plays baseball, those baseball bats themselves, even if the kid's like in third grade, those baseball bats run for like $300 now. It's
Oh my gosh.
ridiculous, right?
Yeah. And then you're paying for the leagues and everything. It's crazy.
There's league fees and now there's all this raffle stuff. And so it's just like for something where it's just supposed to be fun, now you're dropping maybe 1,500, maybe $2,000,
Right.
and I have 2 kids too. So, always double the expense.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm like, okay, I'm begrudgingly going to go along with the raffle
Right.
until I find out that the league itself has a separate savings account that has something like 80 grand in it. And they're just letting the money sit there and grow. And I'm like, we're not some sort of endowment. Like what is this for if we're not like spending that money down? Like, why do we even need to do a raffle? Like and I asked I asked a guy I knew, so how much is the upkeep for the field in the off season? He's like, we could probably do it for like 5,000. I'm like, well, why are we doing this to the parents? We're looking to raise somewhere between, again, like $10,000 to $20,000 cumulatively. Like, well, we just want to make sure we have enough. I'm like, we have enough, right? And so I didn't have the boys participate, even though I was one of the coaches,
Yeah.
which set off its own sort of like so now there's a rift between me and the other dads, which had existed anyway, because I like refused to run that line of, I'm gonna make sure he starts and all this other stuff.
Right.
But now there's the other thing that, Kix, he's stuck up. He does, or whatever it is, right? He's not even going to participate in the raffle.
Yeah.
And I took this stand and sort of I've ostracized a little bit from the league, but the boys, they had a rough go too. They're like, how come, their own teams, like they're bringing the raffle sales and boys don't have any. And they're like, yeah, and I just said to the other kids, I'm like, yeah, we chose not to do it this year. But I know that there was a little bit of sniping that the boys had to deal with separately. And they came to me like, why did we do this? Like, why did you have to take this principled stand?
Yeah.
And honestly, I didn't have a very good answer aside from, I think it's stupid for them to do that, even though I knew that like it was something that now they would have to endure socially. Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, there were prizes. There were other kids on other teams and some of their friends on other teams and some of their teammates on our own team. Like the top prize was like an iPad or something, right? For like selling the most raffles, right? So like,
Wow.
it's not like, here's here's a wristband, Timmy. It's, here's a brand new iPad, which was itself. I felt even more principled in my opposition after that.
Absolutely.
I'm like, that's
wait, that's $1,000 prize. Give me a break.
So how would I advise you? I still wonder today if I did the right thing. What I can tell you is 4+ years later, in ways large and small, my boys, I hope, and because I see this in them, they seem to have a better bullshit detector than other kids. And they seem to realize that, there are times when like some of this stuff is just stupid peer pressure stuff. And I don't need to do that if I don't want to do it. And they can take a stand against it. Now, of course, they're still teenagers, so like it's super hard to be outside a peer group and I'm going to take a principled stand here. I'm just saying that I think that in ways large and small, like that choice then and a few others Sonia and I have made has sort of set an example for, like sometimes the crowd is wrong and sometimes you should be in opposition to that crowd. And, you got to kind of state why it's wrong and stick by what you believe, even if there are consequences for it.
Yeah.
I don't know, is that helpful in any way?
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's interesting because you and I ended up doing the same thing, and at that night, my wife had an event early in the evening, and I had an event later, and we were kind of doing a handoff from the kids and just
Yeah,
meeting um on the go. And it was actually in our cars. And I rolled down my window and she rolled down her window. And I was still very animated about this at this time. And I said to her, I said, this thing just happened. Lake told me this. And this is what happened. And I got really, really upset. Um, and I want you to go up there and talk to him about it and hear what he has to say. I wish I had the time to do it, but I don't want him to go to school tomorrow.
mm,
I'll take him to Legoland or something. I'll take the day off of work and I'll take him to Legoland. And and next year when this event comes around again, we'll take him out for the whole week. I
yeah,
don't feel like he should have to endure bullying or even what he perceives as bullying for my principled stance. And so we just won't go to school while this is going on. And everyone else can have it but I'm not going to make him endure it, and I'm going to take him out of school. And he and I ended up going we got a little bit of a late start to the day, but we went to Legoland, got there around 11 a.m. and spent the day there, and it ended up being just this magical day between just him and me. And it was great. And
yeah,
he didn't have to go through that stuff. And we had a talk about um I said that I felt like this fundraising thing was a scam and we don't
yeah,
participate in scams. And it's a gray area and some people feel that way and some people don't. But this is the way we feel about it. And I'm sorry that as a result of that decision you had to endure some hardship, but that's life sometimes. And I'll try to minimize it for you.
yeah, yeah. How did he respond?
He was freaking thrilled because he didn't have to go to school. He got to go to Legoland.
Do you think the message you tried to relay resonated?
I don't know. He's 6 years old. And
Yeah,
so, I mean, it's hard to know what he absorbs. I feel like the broad strokes are the parts that I can really try to get through now. And and I think maybe he got it.
yeah.
Yeah, they get more than you think they do.
I think that's so true. Jim Henson said a line that I think about all the time. He's like, "Your kids will almost never pick up what you say, but they are watching every single thing you do."
Yes. Yes. That's exactly the deal.
Yeah. So look, as somebody who himself said, "Screw you, crowd," like, I'm like, "You did the right thing, Sean,"
Yeah.
but again, maybe I'm biased here.
I think I did too, and we'll find out. I mean, the we you can't just take your kid out of school in California. They frown on that,
Yeah,
and so you have to get an excuse for the absence, and too many unexcused absences is a big problem. And it's truancy, and they'll come after you for that. And it's a little. I mean, I understand the spirit in which it's intended, but it also kind of creates some problems like this.
yeah.
And so we had to tell the school why we were keeping him out of school.
Were
And
you honest with the school?
yes, and my instinct was to just say he's out of school today. We're taking a mental health day or something like that. And my wife was like, "No, we're going to use the term bullying. We're going to say this, and we're going to give him the principle." I was like, "Okay," and that's what we did. And you know, they never responded to us, and it's we'll see what happens. His today is literally the Monday after that, and so there's no school today and there's no school tomorrow for Veterans Day. And so the first time he's going to be at school again is going to be Wednesday, and I'm sure all this is going to be died, it'll be all forgotten by then. And
Yeah,
so, and that's the by design.
yeah. kids move on real fast.
Oh yeah.
It just, especially at that age,
Yeah, yeah, and that'll be an interesting lesson. I might try to touch back with him and say, "Hey, listen, remember last week the biggest thing in the world was this thing about the prize, and now nobody cares." Like, there's a lesson in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah.
Well, I always like to close these discussions with the same question of everybody. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Give me one principle that you admire or like to live your life by on the subject of raising boys into men.
I like a line from Luke chapter 17. I don't remember the verse, but Jesus says something like, "Remember that the kingdom of God is within you." And I love that because what it means to me is we are streaked with the divine. And if we honor that divinity within us, we lead not only our best life, we lead out our life's purpose, as somebody like Ralph Waldo Emerson would have put it. But I think that that streak of divinity, that light starts to shine outward, and hopefully people start to see in ways large and small, oh, I can do what I need to do with my life too. And, like that's what I hope the boys will pick up. From more than anything from the way I've raised them, like I have it within me to lead the life that is my purpose.
Yeah, I think that's a relatively underappreciated aspect of Christianity, that we were made in God's image.
Yeah.
And it doesn't say that we're just like God. It says that we're made in his image, which is by definition an imperfect image, right? And I think the message of that is that you want to strive for that, recognizing that it is the striving that is a value there, as opposed to the actual attainment of it, because the
Hmm.
attainment is impossible.
Yeah.
And
I think completely. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a
It's
really,
to if look, there are a lot of secular interpretations of that too, and I think that of that line. But
yeah,
there was this, but that has been increasingly something by which I lead my own life, and I don't really talk about my own Christian faith much unless people ask.
yeah,
But I just let it sort of be known, like it's one of that is like a guiding principle that I live by.
yeah,
Remember that the kingdom of God is within you. That it just lights me up every time I think that.
yeah,
Anytime you're having a bad day, anytime something's, going good or ill, just like, okay, how can I best respond to this moment with courage, compassion, everything else?
yeah. I think that's amazing. I think that's a wonderful place to leave off. Paul, thank you so much for sharing your stories and your perspective and your authenticity. I love hearing about this stuff and about your journey. I love
Thanks,
reading
man.
your newsletter, and it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today.
I wish you the best of luck with this podcast and everything else you're doing, and stay in touch for real, man. Like
Thanks so much.
when I
I
got your
absolutely
email.
will. You'll definitely hear from me. Paul Kix is a storyteller, a journalist, and just an all around fantastic man. His newsletter about the craft of storytelling is absolutely amazing. You should definitely join it. The link is in the show notes. Paul, again, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on Raising Men.
Awesome.
Raising Men is produced by Phil Hernandez. This episode was edited by Ralph Tolentino.